Welcome to the Big John Bass
Show!
Welcome to the Big John Bass Show!
Hello legends and welcome to the Big John Bass Show. I'm your host, Big John Bass. Well, the dust has settled after what was quite an interesting game against Manchester City. A 2-2 draw. Hopefully, by the time you listen to this, you will have listened to all your favourite podcasts, including The Fighting Cock, and you'll have your full fix of, immediate reactions. And now you're ready for a bit more, of a calm take, a bit more of a step back and look into what's going on. And obviously, we've also had the transfer window. We've also had Romero's statement, so we're going to get into all of that. And also a little look ahead to the Manchester United game this weekend. And I'll have a look at Twitter and see if you've asked me any lovely questions. So, first of all, let's talk about the City game. Well, look, first of all, a good result, right? I think a lot of us, myself included, thought this could have been a bloodbath and that we might have ended up being slapped about quite badly by a Manchester City side who, whilst not being electric this season, they've been a bit stuttering themselves, just have tons of quality in their squad and just felt like they were in a better place than we were going into that game. But we do have the Tottenham hoodoo over Manchester City, which will never not be funny. And I know people have made this point before about it there is something so classic Spurs and very Spursy that one of the greatest managers of all time, Pep Guardiola's bogey team, is us. Like that is hilarious. There's no way around it. It's really, really funny that he just can't seem to consistently do well against us. I actually love that. I think it's really funny. And it does make me feel like if he does want to shake this curse, the only way you're ever going to win consistently at the Lane, Pep, is to become our manager. It's obvious. He has to break the curse himself. By becoming... It's a bit like, was it in Batman, you've got to become the thing you fear the most. That's what he needs to do. He just needs to become the Spurs manager, and then maybe it'll all work out for him. So, yeah, look, there was always that element of, could we do something in this game? Is there a way for Spurs to find, use the curse to our benefit? But I was surprised by the result. Now, the performance was a really interesting one. Football cliches are there for a reason, right? This was definitely a game of two halves. The first half was terrible, right? For me anyway, there's no sugarcoating it. That was a pretty bad half of football. So much so that, Change for Tottenham planned their 75th minute walkout. I think I tweeted something like, there'll be about 13 people left by the 76th minute if this carries on, because it was so bad that I just couldn't see a world where it wasn't, 3, 4, 5 goals going in, and people just having enough of what's happening and just decide that they're going to leave. But that's not what happened. The second half was just a total different performance. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that I want to talk about today is, why does this keep happening? Like, why do we keep having these like Jekyll and Hyde type performances where we have to go a couple of goals down before we start to play and then we have to fight back? Because in some ways that shows a lot of character, right? It shows like we're prepared to fight and we can dig in and we can claw our way back. But, it's been pointed out to me before by Cow on The Fighting Cock that it's like cowardice almost, right? It's like, well, when the stakes are a lot lower, and no one gives you a chance, it's a lot easier to go, oh, okay, now we can start playing. Because if you do lose 3 or 4, well, you're losing 2-0 anyway, so what does it matter? So I do kind of understand that logic as well. So I'm less about, is this just brilliant character from the players and they're prepared to fight back, or are they cowards? I'm just more interested in to understand, like, why is this happening? Like, is this, and again, it's been alluded to a lot, is this Thomas Frank's tactics, and then when we go 2-0 down, the players just abandon it and go, right, we're just going to try and claw our way back into this game? Is it his tactics doing badly and then him changing the tactics and it going well? That's also an option. Or is it a case of like, it's just random chaos and there's just not a lot of planning there, and so it does ultimately just come down to what's happening in that moment, and there isn't too much. We're basically overcomplicating it by assuming it's sort of tactical shifts and changes, and it is just the ebbs and flows of the game. And actually, the City game's a good example of that, where a lot of people have pointed out that City sort of took a step back and took their foot off the gas. So that is also, a potential route you could look at and think, is that what's happening? But I just can't understand it, because the second half was fantastic. It was really good. And players that I've been somewhat underwhelmed by or critical of, Xavi Simons, prime example, looked fantastic. Like, he was great. He was really great in this game. And if that's what we're going to get and see from him going forward, and hopefully, still improving as well, then we have got a really good player. We have got a brilliant player potentially there. So that was really exciting. Solanke's hold-up play, like, incredible. And it did make the whole team tick. I thought Odegaard looked good. I thought Palhinha played really well. And it's actually nice to see players performing well individually as a part of this team. Now, I know that seems like a really obvious thing to say, but it does feel like there's just been such a cloud where it's like, we're either the whole team performs quite well, Dortmund, and we just steamroller them, and everyone goes at us because it's a farmers league, or everyone's rubbish, in which case it's like, oh, are we the farmers, right? But it's actually quite nice to, put in a good performance in the second half, and then actually see some individuals looking like they're improving or playing well, or actually standing out. I thought Archie Gray as well was another one who had a good game, noticeably so. But all of these players' best moments were in that second half, when we sort of adopted a much more aggressive front foot, direct style of play, and passing the ball, just moving the ball much quicker. So is that what we should be doing from the outset, right? And is it Thomas Frank's instruction to be like, let's just go into the game more cautiously, and then we're having to, for want of a better word, sort of undo all of that in the second halves? I don't know, but I did feel slightly encouraged that there is clearly a way for us to play better, and that we can do that with some of our better players. So that, I think, is super interesting. Also, I just want to talk about Solanke's goal. Like, the second one, not the first one. The first one, in fact, let me start with the first one. The first goal, Rodri, if you haven't seen it, Rodri is crying about that goal being able to stand, crying about VAR not picking it out. Mate, just have a look at your two fouls that were both yellow cards. Like the second one, which I think was on Odegaard, after he'd just been booked for a pretty horrible tackle on Conor Gallagher, is just one of those that's always a booking. Like, we're on the break, middle of the pitch, and he just wipes him out. It's not like a aggressive foul, but he just took him out. That's a booking. In any other game, that is a booking. And he doesn't get one, stays on the pitch. And he's got the temerity to come out and have a go at VAR for not picking out that type of sort of goal that we see all the time. Now, I understand that I am very much in the Yadar category now as a football fan, but I've seen that replay so many times, and I understand that, like, Gay gets his foot there first, but he doesn't get the ball, right? He just plants his foot near the ball, and Solanke is already in motion of trying to strike the ball. Now, I've seen that given as a penalty loads of times, where they're basically just putting their foot in the way, so you boot the back of their foot and it gets given as a penalty. And I've seen it the other way as well, where it's given as a foul. It's just, for me, it's just one of those grey areas where you can interpret that however you like, which means it's not clear and obvious. So just shut up. Just shut up, Rodri. You've got to calm down. He also looks a shell of himself, doesn't he? And I know he's had a very serious injury, but I didn't even know he was playing for ages, which is interesting because he just looked completely anonymous. Anyway, so yeah, Solanke's second goal. Wow, like what a goal that is. First of all, great work by Conor Gallagher. Just, it's a little bit scrappy, ball's sort of bobbling off, but he's getting in amongst it. He's shutting people down. He's wanting to win the ball back, and it's that tenacity, that bite in that midfield, that passion and gravy that we like to see, gets him the opportunity to get that ball. And when he gets to whip it in, it is a little bit behind Solanke, so fair enough, right? Not the best ball from that perspective, but he does just put it into a dangerous area. And Solanke, that is just pure instinct and technical ability to be able to shift your weight and move your body into that position to get something on it. It's fantastic. Like, what a brilliant piece of improvisation. Love to see that type of finish from a striker. he's in fantastic form. Like, he's just come back in and just banging goals, which is exactly what we need. And I thought he had a really, really good performance in that game. And I'm just really hoping that this, I've just rolled my ankle a little bit, I'll be fine, isn't a Kulusevski, it's just a knock, right? I actually really do hope, I mean, obviously I hoped Kulusevski's was also just a knock, just to be clear. But I am hoping this is just a rolled ankle and isn't going to be some injury that keeps him out for months and months, because if he carries on playing in this form, then we're going to be fine, aren't we? Because he's going to score us enough goals and get us into a good position in the league, which is great. So, yeah, he obviously makes it 2-2. The crowd are going mental. The change for Tottenham, sort of 75-minute walkout. Look, I've been very supportive of what they're trying to do, and I think it, is good that people are speaking out for things that they find frustrating and they want to do. It's just a classic case of it's just bad timing, excuse the pun, but it's just the wrong game where, of course, it gets exciting just before the 75th minute, right? And that makes it very difficult for people to want to leave their seat. And that's kind of part of the point, right, is that you kind of have to do it regardless, because that shows how much it means to you. But I just think from a optics point of view, and I hate the word, but it was just unfortunate timing for them. And I don't think people should be so hard on change for Tottenham. It's my personal view. They are trying to do something, and they're trying to find ways that can get people involved and get people to make a statement that will visually and emotionally have a reaction, right? So that can do something for, for the change that they want to see in the club. So, yeah, I understood why that was difficult for people to leave their seat, because for me, watching at home, I was desperate for us to get the winner. And I really thought we were going to. I just felt like it was set up for us to go and get the winner, and it didn't happen, which was a real shame. But yeah, it felt like if we'd have won that, it would have been deserved for the second half alone, because City were always dangerous, and in the first half they didn't get out of second gear. But it did feel to me like in the second half that we definitely were good for the win. Right. I also feel like that result, and hopefully that performance in the second half, was enough to give the players, at least, and the playing squad, and hopefully us as well as fans, a bit of optimism that actually, even with these injuries, and we've got this enormous injury list, that there is still chance for us to put a run together through this awful February. Now, I know I've been saying, and I'm sure I said on this podcast a few episodes ago, that we could potentially get no points from this run. Now, we've got a point already, so that's one more than I said, which is good. And we've got United next, and we'll get into the United game shortly. But that is obviously, it's not an ideal run for us coming up. We've got Newcastle in there, we've got the Scum in there. It's going to be a really tricky month. But I just feel weirdly more optimistic now than I was obviously before the City game. And it's not really based on a lot, right? Because I was hoping that we'd do some work in the transfer window. Again, we'll get into that shortly. And that hasn't happened. And we obviously didn't win this game, and we started that first half terribly. But I did an exercise, and I was talking to Flav on the Fighting Cock about this earlier. So depending on what your listening habits are, I'm sure you will listen to the Fighting Cock before you listen to me. So if you have listened to that, then great. If you haven't, this is basically the sort of point that I wanted to make, which is that I've been trying to, and I can't, forgive me, someone made a comment on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, basically saying like, John, do you want to eat some humble pie? Because you and Flav were digging out Frank for a whole hour on your podcast, and now we finished fourth in the Champions League. How do you feel? And I kind of, I took it in good faith. So I was like, appreciate the comment. I'll eat the humble pie gladly when we start not being terrible in the league, right? And until then, I'm not going to order it because I just want to see how it goes. But it sort of triggered something in my head, which is like, am I just like blinded by my own bias now? Like, have I just made my mind up that Frank is terrible and I'm not seeing the wood for the trees? So I wanted to do an exercise, which I think is good for anyone to do in life in general. If you're ever having a debate, or you've got a friend who's like, oh, I believe this thing, right? And you just think it's crazy, or they're going to vote for this party, and you're like, why are you voting for this political party, or whatever, right? It's always good to go, right, imagine I'm now in that position. Why do I think that? Why, and how could I make a case for that, right? And it could be a conspiracy theory, why you think it's flat Earth. Okay, if you had to believe in flat Earth, what are your points? What are your talking points? What's your arguments? Try and make those cases. Because even if you ultimately get to the end of that conclusion and go, well, I still don't believe in flat Earth, fair enough. But maybe you've just got a better perspective on the other person. You can maybe start to understand and find some common ground. Anyway, I say all that to say this. I've been starting to think about Thomas Frank in that same way and thinking, right, if I had to make a case, if I had to come out and defend him, why he's still got the job, what would I be looking at? And I would be looking at, okay, well, we finished fourth in the Champions League. You can't, argue with that. You can make a lot of cases about the other leagues in Europe being terrible and all the rest of it, but the results are the results, and he's got what he's needed to get to. So that would be count one. Then I'd be looking at it going, well, we have got an enormous injury list, like a horrific injury list. And I know people will say, yeah, but Ange had a big injury list and no one seemed to care. Sure, but they should have, right? That was impacting our ability to do what we needed to do. And so we do still have a ton of injured players. That means we can't put out a consistent team. We can't put out our best team on paper. So that does have an effect, right? And actually, a few of my friends in some of my WhatsApp groups making exactly this point, which is like, it does feel a bit like no one is mentioning Spurs specifically having like Maddison and Kulusevski out for the whole season, and they're two of the better players in the league, let alone just in our squad, out for the whole season. Like, that is going to have an impact on us. So that definitely is something that I haven't really considered to that extent. We've just had the transfer window. I'm going to talk about that after this section. The transfer window is, Conor Gallagher, yeah, fair enough. And then we tried FC, right? Because we didn't get the players we wanted to get into the squad. Mainly a couple of youth players and Conor Gallagher. That's what we've got. So it hasn't really changed the position of the squad that's full of injuries. So what do we really do? And then you start to look at, some of the performances, and you think, okay, well, we're not getting the results, but like, there are moments in some of these games where we're performing quite well. Is that the start of something? Is there a forward move in terms of the way that we're playing? And am I just looking at it going, oh, well, we're still not, we're not getting results. We're losing against West Ham. We're drawing at home against Man City. We should have won that game. We should have done this. We should have done that. And is this just a case of like, we have to just give him that bit more time in order to get some more players back and spend more time with these players? Because Xavi's improving, Odegaard is improving for sure. Like, Solanke's come back and looked great. Well, that's three attackers that are all doing pretty well under Frank. Conor Gallagher played well in the last game. Archie Gray's starting to play better every game. Are we slowly but surely seeing these improvements? And that's the thing that's given me like a little bit of pause, where when I take a step back, if I had to make the decision, I would still be looking to find a new manager. But I can now understand a lot more why maybe the club haven't done it. And I'm not saying they're right to have not sacked him or they're wrong. I'm just saying I can understand why maybe, potentially, they are holding firm on keeping him, at least to the summer. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the sort of City game and the wider view of like Thomas Frank post this game. Now I want to get into a little bit about the transfer window. Let's take my cursory sip of water there for the fans. Okay, so, well, it wasn't even water actually, it's Barocca. And it's not even just Barocca, it's Barocca with Solpadeine. I've got a bit of you can probably tell, I've got a bit of a sore throat today and a bit of a headache. And sometimes like they move into like migraine levels. So sometimes I'll take a little Solpadeine just to like take the edge off the migraines. So I don't know why I'm telling you this, I'm just sharing my thoughts. It's also fantastic if you've got a hangover, bit of Barocca, bit of Solpadeine. Bosh, probably not recommended by your GP, but I'm not a medical practitioner, so don't take anything I say as gospel fact. It's just a bit of a laugh in it for the lads. Right, so let's talk about transfer window before I get into trouble with the sort of British Medical Association or something. Been pretty underwhelming, hasn't it? And again, talking to Flav about this on the Fighting Cock earlier today. But my view is basically this, which is I'm annoyed about the transfer window, and I could sit here and again just tell you why it's terrible and we should spend money and there's got to be a load of players out there and what we're doing and the scouting department and Langer's terrible and blah blah blah. I can do that till the cows come home. That's how I feel about it, and I'm sure many people listening to this feel the same. But let's do the same exercise. Sit on the other side. Why? Why haven't we done it? And I do look around. I think there's definitely some sort of weird bias in the Premier League for Premier League clubs to look at Premier League players, because there's been a big deal made out of Florian Wirtz and Xavi Simons. They can't acclimatise to the league. They're too weak. Premier League's too physical and blah, blah, blah. And it's now taken them, 6 months or whatever it has for them to start showing their true form. And Premier League clubs are looking at that going, well, we can't afford to wait for players from France or Germany or the Netherlands to perform. We need them to perform right now. So we should buy Premier League proven players, even if those players aren't great. Strand Larsen. So, there's a lot of thought process here, basically, about why certain clubs have tried to sign certain players. And if you look at the Premier League clubs, they've signed a lot of players from within the Premier League. City have signed Semenyo and Gueye. Palace have signed Brennan Johnson, right? We were looking at ourselves. We brought Conor Gallagher, fair enough, from Atletico Madrid, but he's a British player, right? He's an English lad who's been brought up in the English football system. And we were also looking at Robertson. Now, yeah, sure, we brought in a Brazilian youngster, fair enough, but he's not really going to contribute to the squad straight away. And we've also brought a British youngster as well, Scottish lad, I think he is. So, again, is there just a bias? Is there a thinking that the Premier League is so physical and so demanding that there's almost no point, unless you can get the very, very top players from these other leagues, which aren't available in January, is there much point in doing this stuff earlier? And I do understand why that's maybe the thought process. Again, not saying I agree with it. I'm sure there must be players out there that you can get. But off the top of my head, I can't think who they are, right? And I know I'm not a scout. It's not my responsibility to do that. But maybe that's the club's thinking. Now, I will say this. I also think Langer should be fired, because I do feel like the summer window and his previous windows also haven't been ideal. So I would like us in the summer to address that issue alongside the manager issue, depending on how Thomas Frank does now. If he wins every game until now and the end of the season, and we're playing free-flowing football, maybe Frank can stay. But I do think that Langer needs to be moved on, or at least just moved into youth scout, head of youth scouting, because he clearly got an eye for a young player. That I don't think there's any concern there. But we need a director of football who can see the overall football landscape of what we're trying to do, the culture of what we're trying to do from a football perspective, and implement a manager and coaching staff that can deliver that style of football and deliver success on the pitch, and then to support them with the right calibre of first team quality players that can execute that game plan. And I just don't feel that Langer and the Langer-Paratici axis ever worked to deliver that. And so, again, I'm trying to take a step back and look longer term. And if anyone that listened to the previous episode, which is, what I'm sort of calling the Spurs DNA episodes, where myself and a guest, in this instance it was Slav, we're going to look at the club through three lenses, right? The one is the playing staff, the manager, the players. 2 is the director of football, and 3 is the CEO or the ownership. And I do feel like you need to give more time the higher you go up that food chain. And so Vinay, and I'm not going to say the Lewis family, I'll go specifically with Vinay. He does need a little bit more time to really see what he does. If we get to the summer, I don't know, we finish 16th and the football's still terrible, he needs to make a decision on getting rid of Langer and getting rid of Frank and bringing in a new director of football and a new manager. Because we have to start thinking about these things more bigger picture about the culture and ethos of the club. Otherwise, it's just constantly this manager wants this type of player, and now we've got a different manager and they like a different system, so we need different players, and it all becomes very bitty and short term. And I think that's kind of what's got us into this issue. If you look at our last sort of 3 or 4 managers, they've always been quite fundamentally quite different. They play back 3, they play back 4, they play possession, they play counter attack. It's messy. And we need to improve the way that works, because at the minute it's just not good. Okay, so next up we have the Manchester United away game, Now, again, I'm sure there will be a ton of podcasts, including the very own Fighting Cock. We'll do previews to this game. If you're not a patron of Fighting Cock, go and sign up. Then you can listen to the preview with Flav. And they'll go into a lot more detail about the specifics. I'm just looking at this more from a high-level view at this moment in time, right? Which for me is very much about momentum. This February has been sort of written off by me and by many other people as we're not going to get any points, this is a really hard run, this is going to be terrible. And one of the things I always talk about is like the storylines in football. And this is peak Spursiness, where this could be a really good run for us. And if it is, it could really turn our season into a much more positive place. Now, I know that sounds super hopeful thinking. This isn't coming from a place of, well, I've seen green shoots in the way that we're playing, and that means that this is going to happen and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. No. I'm basing it on absolutely nothing. I'm basing it on, it's just what happens in football. When you're supposed to win all the games, you lose the games, and then when you're supposed to lose all the games, you win the games. Sometimes it goes like that. And I just feel like the performance against City in that second half, the goals, the sort of good feeling that generated, might help us in a weird way. Might help us sort of get to a point where we just play with a little less fear. And actually we're playing teams that will have a go and leave some space for us, and maybe that might help us as well. And I do think if we can get something, even just another draw from that United game, that will give us some momentum. If we can somehow win against them, then that, again, is just brilliant, right? You would not expect to get 4 points out of City and United. So I don't know what's going to happen in those games. I haven't enough, I guess, thinking time really about how that will actually play out. But I am weirdly optimistic that there's something there for us, that we could get something out of that game. And if we do, that could help to turn that momentum that I'm talking about, where the players and us as fans start to realise, look, Frank's not going anywhere. Let's just get behind them. Let's just support the team, and let's reassess this in the summer. Now, the downside and the sort of concern is the injuries, right? This is... we are racking them up. And actually, just to go back to the transfer window, or the lack of transfers in that window, Romero's statement, I'm sure most people have seen it now, but he used the word disgrace. The Spanish translation can also mean unfortunate. So we don't really know if he's calling out the board for the fact that we've got so few players in during this period. But either way, he's not happy about the situation. I think he's speaking for all of us there when, in the worst case, it's a bit of a disgrace that we haven't at least strengthened with some more established players, and it's unfortunate that we have a ton of injuries and that we haven't managed to get players to help us with that. Either way, I think the players are aware that this is going to be a difficult timing with these injuries, and it's definitely going to be hard for us to get through these games with that amount of injuries. And also, look, United are in great form. Like, they certainly have taken a turn since they brought in an interim manager in Carrick and have started to just embrace the way that they want to play as a club. Which, to go back to my earlier point about the way the club are thinking about Thomas Frank, is again one of the very strong counter arguments. Right, new manager bounce, interim manager, just let the leash off, let the players play. So this United game is going to be a tough one. Not something that I'm relishing, but I don't know why. I just have this optimistic feeling that we might get something out of it and it might help. So we'll see. I'm always optimistic, so maybe this United game will give us a little bit of something. Right, I'm going to go into your Twitter questions now. So thank you for those that send me questions. I really do appreciate it. And I know sometimes I go, can everyone send me questions? And then I forget to answer them, which is really annoying. So I'm very sorry. So I'm going to do my best to answer all of these today. So Jack C, here for Spurs, says, are you surprised we didn't recall some of the older youths from loans just to bolster bench with players who've experienced men's football rather than the kids who have clearly never going to play? Thinking Lancashire, Donnelly, Devine, Hall, maybe even more. Yeah, do you know what? It's a good question. And I guess this is the other thing. If I just take my sort of emotional hat off and just think about it logically, there is an element of the club have to balance the long-term progression of these players and really think, is it better for their development to stay versus what we need short-term and having them on the bench? And yeah, I do think that, in certain areas, like for example, like Donnelly, I feel like we might as well just bring him in because we sort of need a more attacking midfielder as cover for Simmons. Now, clearly, he's nowhere near the level of Simmons, but he has played men's football, to your point, and he could do a role there. And yeah, Mikey Moore is the same thing. It's another wide option that you've got in the squad where we've got injuries. So yeah, look, I think there's a lot of good points there. I guess I just don't know what the clarifications are of the implications for cancelling those loans or cutting them short. I don't know if there's not just a financial aspect, but if there's any penalties there. I really don't know. But yeah, it's a really good question. I personally would have liked to have brought some of them back if we weren't going to sign players, but who knows. Chris, 1882 champ man CMC. How do Vinay, Langer and Paratici spend their day off on Monday? Well, I imagine they had lunch. That's all they ever seem to do, isn't it? Probably Thomas Frank was there. A bit of lunch, talking about, God, can you imagine signing players on transfer deadline day? That'd be mental, wouldn't it? And having a right laugh. Jack Law, custard creams with a Z. That's quite good. At this point, as Spurs fans, why do we even bother? We love it, don't we? We're gluttons for punishment. We do love it. The thing is, and people ask me, like, why have you started a pod now when it's the worst it's been for years? And I was thinking about this, thinking like, yeah, it does make sense, but I sort of feel like, obviously you want to win all the time, right? Like, football is ultimately, the game is about glory and all that. But it's the journey, right? It's the sort of, can you get it right? That's why, like, when I play like FIFA and football games, and I'm like, finally get my team winning everything, I get bored really quickly. I'm like, ugh, I just want to like go and take over Luton and see if I can get them promoted, because it's a challenge, it's tough, it's difficult. It gets really boring when you've got all the best players and you're just winning all the time. And I feel sometimes that's the way it is with football, which is that it needs to be rubbish for a period in order for when it gets good that you enjoy it a lot more. And maybe that's just because I'm a Spurs fan, I've sort of like Stockholm syndromed myself into believing that. But I do sort of feel like this is all part of it. It's a soap opera, right? And sometimes you get episodes where everyone's getting murdered and divorcing each other and it's like really miserable. And other episodes it's really light-hearted and fun and it's all exciting and brilliant. You've got to stick with it through both in order to appreciate both sides of it. But yeah, lovely question. Thanks for that. Right, who's next? Spurs Simpsons. Hello, mate. Should we play in the home white shorts for league games in an attempt to replicate the form shown in Europe? Love the thought process, and I appreciate the question's probably tongue-in-cheek, but I love that we have like a different kit, sort of, like a different way of wearing our kit in Europe. There's something so magic about that all-white kit for Spurs in Europe, isn't it? Like, it's just incredible, and I wouldn't want to sacrifice the specialness of that to potentially help us in the league. But I love the question because, yeah, we look sick all in white. It's so good. Ole Andreas Olsen has said, talk about Romero. He's off, surely. What can make him stay? Well, his contract, for one. He can't leave. He's just under massive extension, hasn't he? And also, look, I think on some level, the board... Look, I always think when there's players like saying stuff like this, I think we all assume that everyone in the boardroom and the owners are like, oh no, he's slagging us off. There'll be some people in that boardroom who'll be on his side, who wanted us to be more ambitious, who wanted to sign players. They might not be able to say it publicly, they might not talk about it, but they will be on his side and they will agree and they will like that he's put it out there because it applies pressure. And there's all these different sort of politics behind the scenes that this could potentially help their internal politics and help their case. So I don't think this, this statement that he's put out is automatically going to be cause him that many issues, if I'm honest, because he's already sort of called them all liars and stuff. So I think he's said worse, and it'll be fine. I think again, we'll get some players back if we can get some momentum. It depends what happens from here on in. I'm always looking at the sort of positive, optimistic view, right? But if we now lose these next 3 or 4 games and we get more injuries and we aren't recalling players and we're barely able to field a team, he's going to start saying all sorts of mad stuff. I said on the Fighting Cock, the reason that he went off against Man City wasn't because he was ill, it's because he wanted to get ready for the 75th minute. He was buying exit for the Change for Tottenham protest. That's what he was doing, because he obviously hates the Lewis family and ENIC as much as the rest of us. So, yeah, I don't know what will happen in the future, obviously, but I don't think that him making his statements is going to mean that he's definitely off. If anything, to me, it shows that he really cares. Like, he's really passionate about the club, and he obviously gives a shit, basically, about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that, to me, is important in a captain and something that I rate. And I'm glad that he, is prepared to put his reputation and his, name on the line for the betterment of the club, and for us to be able to visually and audibly see his frustrations and why he's annoyed and upset. Like, I actually appreciate that, because it is a problem with the modern game, and this will probably be my sort of bass of the net rant, is players just don't care, do they? There's not the same sort of passion there. And I'm not saying it used to be like, oh yeah, back in my day, players would drink down the local pub and we'd be playing pool together. Like, obviously, I lived through basically the end of the 90s and the noughties, really watching football. They were all still millionaires then, right? They were all still living in a different world. But there did seem that, players, and I'm not just talking about the sort of Steven Gerrards or, like Ryan Giggses and Scholes and Neville and all this that played for a club for a million years. Just players would just get it at a club. They'd just come to a club and they would just buy in to what it meant to be that club. I mean, like, a good example I can think of is like Lucas Radebe, for the older, more discerning gentlemen and ladies on this that listen to this podcast. Played for Leeds, from South Africa, I believe. Came over to Leeds, can't remember where he signed from, and just got it straight away. And the fans love him. And he's now got a beer, I think, named after him. Or he started a beer thing in Leeds, and like Lucas Radebe's like so associated with Leeds, despite not being from the area, not coming through their academy. Just got it, just got what it meant, and that's the thing with Romero for me. It's like, he's from Argentina. He's got no direct correlation to Spurs, but he gets it. He wants to be part of the culture, and he really wants the club to be better. If he didn't care and wanted to leave, why would he say all this stuff? Like, why would he bother? And I get that it's not agitating for a move and blah, blah, but he just signed a massive contract extension. So I don't think this necessarily means that he's off. I just think that he cares about the club. And my bass of the net for this week is I wish more players would care for the club and would be more passionate and openly passionate about their love for the club. Because, I know Jacket, Rule the Roost, and some of the other boys talk about it as well. Players just don't love us, do they, when they finish playing? Like, there's not that many ex-Spurs players who are sort of out there associated with us, talking about us. Now, my hope is that the sort of Pochettino era players will be that, the Jans, the Sonnies, they will still talk about and be associated with the club in that way, because we've got a big gap in our history where, just aside from Dawson and King, basically, there's no one that's really talks about the club favourably like that. So hopefully we'll get more of it. Right, that's enough, I think, from me for this week. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm going to do more guest episodes. So I was originally going to do just one a month at the end of each month with a guest, but I think people prefer the guest episode. So I will try to set them up. I'm not just going to have just the Fighting Cock lads on, so that we don't just, you can't have too much of a good thing, can you? So I will get some of the other sort of people from around the Spurs universe, let's say, to come on the pod as well. So if you've got any suggestions for guests that you'd like to hear on the Big John Bass Show, let me know, and I'll do my best to reach out to them and get them to come on the pod. And we'll do, the sort of DNA episodes where we'll really look at things from a higher view, and I'll do those a bit more frequently than just once a month, so we can really start to take in what's happening with Spurs. So thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate it. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Tell your friends, tell your family. And I'll see you all very soon. Peace.